Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Give some secretary the power, and she'll cost you more than anything. More information right after a short pause. Here we go. Can't get my car back from a company car park? Enjoy loads of taxi fare charges. This anecdote takes place several years ago at a company I used to work for. This particular company had a staff entrance on the side of the building where the staff used to enter and exit, and there was a works car park there too. It was also a very posh entrance at the front of the building, which was reserved for the directors and any customers that visited. It was known that if any staff tried to use the front entrance, we called it the exec entrance, they'd normally get told off for overstepping their rank. Yes, some companies are still this backwards even in the mid-2010s. Anyway, this starts on one particular morning where a customer I'd been working with was visiting our building. My boss's boss not only gave me free rein to come and go through the main entrance to facilitate our customer, e.g. people arriving at different times, taking them to lunch, doing a tour of the building, etc., but he also authorized a parking space for me in the posh exec car park. This was signed off by one of the directors. No issues, we had a great day, and the customer was very impressed. Edit. All cars parked in the exec park had their keys kept by reception. I assume because mine was a Nissan key and not the posh BMWs and Audis, etc., they weren't too bothered on keeping an eye on it. Feeling like I'd done a good day's work, I went back to get my car from the posh part of the building. Living in England, the rain had picked up, so I was looking forward to getting out of the bad weather. Being selfish, I had my hair done quite nicely, and it'd be nice to come back home looking presentable. What I didn't know was that after 5 p.m., the posh entrance was closed. There's a secure gate to stop vehicles going in and out, and unfortunately, my car was parked in the secure part. To make things worse, I'd left my car keys with the receptionist who'd already finished for the day. This was when I learned that we worked hard so the directors didn't have to. This takes place before taxi apps were commonplace, so I was standing in the rain for about half an hour waiting for an overpriced taxi from the nearby railway station, getting more and more frustrated that I couldn't go home in my own car. So I ended up sitting in a taxi, very annoyed, hair and makeup ruined, staring at a bill for £50 just to get home. Let alone make the trip back to work the next day, which cost slightly more due to rush hour traffic. When I went to grab my car keys the next day, I walked through the exec entrance. Within seconds, I was asked why I was entering through this door. I said, "Morning all, you've got my keys. My car's parked there. Look, it's the blue car in space number 6. And I expected just to get given my keys and told to go away. However, what I was told was, "No, sorry, this is an executive entrance. Please exit the building and use the staff entrance around the corner." I politely said, "Look, my car's parked just outside. You have my keys in that box by your arm that you're pointing with. Can you just give me my keys so I can leave and take my car with me?" Well, this didn't happen. The person behind the desk was so proud that they had some power over others that I was just told only senior employees and customers are permitted here. Please use the side door. You're not authorized to use this entrance. Please do not try and enter again, otherwise you'll be written up. I wasn't rude, but I realized being written up wouldn't be any favor to me. I also got annoyed that I'd put in the effort earlier so I wouldn't fight what could be construed as a disciplinary threat. The last thing I asked was that I had this written in a formal email, which the angry secretary was more than happy to do so, including phrases like gross misconduct and a serious lack of respect. Not only did I save this email to every folder in my mailbox, I printed it a few times and stored it in various places around where I worked just so I could get a hold of it if needed. Revenge mode activated. Shortly after this, I told my boss that the senior team wouldn't let me get my car back and threatened to write me up for asking so. He was 100% behind me. He said if the company's holding your car, get taxis everywhere, your commute, going to get lunch, your gym session in the evening, etc. So that's what I did. I left my car in the executive car park and just took cabs everywhere. Basically my personal life. I took lunch out of the office every day. I went grocery shopping as I normally do, twice a week, plus 1 or 2 times for quick visits when I forgot something. Going to the gym, visiting my parents, nights out with my boyfriend. I purposely left my car in that car park as long as I could until I got asked about it. All the time racking up taxi fares. I had it in writing from my manager, and since neither of us were exec level, we didn't want to push back. Rather, I just wanted to see how far I could push it. After 7 weeks, one of the directors had noticed my car looking very sorry for itself in their car park At least one customer had asked why there was an abandoned car there with bird poo all over it and a flat tire. We have car park passes, so it only took a few seconds to ask which employee car pass number 12345 belonged to. And when I was asked, I forwarded the email saying I wasn't allowed to get my car back. I then asked if I could get half an hour with the legal director, as I wasn't sure if this was illegal, preventing an employee from retrieving their own car. As soon as I mentioned the legal director, I was asked to come straight in via the posh entrance and speak to a few of the directors who somehow made the time for me. Literally, I sent my email at 11 a.m., and by the time I got back from lunch in a taxi at 1 p.m., I had an email requesting a chat ASAP. They were quite nervously sitting around a table, and as soon as I mentioned the potential legal issue of withholding an employee's personal possessions without due reason, the directors fell over themselves to apologize and say it was a miscommunication and I was free to take my car back. I asked why it took 7 weeks to get to this point, and I wanted my car back as soon as I could because, well, it's my car. The directors had no answer and were surprisingly very quiet. Well, that's where it gets fun. I presented a bill for about 3,000 pounds of taxi fares over 7 weeks and said that this needed paying. Furthermore, as my car now had a flat battery and looked awful, the company could also pay for recovery to my car dealership pay for car detailing because of the bird poo all over it, and a full dealership service and health check, plus 2 months finance that I was paying on a car that they had in their possession. I also told them that I would no longer entertain any customers going forward and pulled out the printout that I was supposed to be able to park there and entertain customers as necessary, signed by one of the directors in that very room. The atmosphere was not only tense enough that you could cut it with a butter knife, but I felt a resounding feeling of deflation from the directors who realized they'd effed up by asking employees to do their work for them, e.g. showing customers around, and then doubling down by kicking those employees out of their little corner before the job was complete. All in all, I wouldn't be surprised if it cost the company over 6,000 pounds just because I wasn't allowed to go and get my car back from the manager's parking because the secretary didn't let me. And our next story. Police chief's son-in-law demolished my cottage and built a gas station on my land. First of all, English is not my native language, so forgive me poor writing. I own a land in a country that I shouldn't name here so that the number of Borat jokes doesn't exceed all the daily limits, but I think you can roughly guess where it is. It's a huge piece of land on the outskirts of the city that includes several hectares of fields and a small piece of forest and a small creek. Previously, the place was cultivated by potlucks, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, I managed to buy the land for a price comparable to a pack of cigarettes and start farming myself. In the meantime, gradually over 20 years, and the neighboring town came out of the crisis of those years and began to grow. At some point, I realized that it was more profitable to spend my time on something and invested in a store in another larger city, and the fields began to surrender to the agricultural firm. At that time, I had a small house next to forest, but I didn't have much time to go there. I used to go there about 2 weeks a year just as a vacation, if it was a good year, sometimes even less. So the house didn't look the best from the outside. I wouldn't say it was abandoned, but I guess some people thought otherwise. Once I drove there in the summer and saw that my house was demolished and a gas station was being built on my land adjacent to the road, out of town, and a self-service car wash next to it. Part of my forest was also bulldozed and paved with sidewalk tiles. Only after a situation like this do you begin to understand how much and how deeply a man can be surprised. The place was so different that I didn't even realize it was my land and thought I was lost. When I went there, the workers didn't even let me in and threatened to call the police because the new owner has relatives in the police department. The next time I came with my lawyer and found out that the owner has documents on the purchase of this land with my signatures, which are not similar to my signatures, and his father-in-law is the head of the local police department. The situation is not nice. My lawyer, an elderly man and a guy with experience, told me that if this had happened 15 years ago, I could have said goodbye to this land, and that's the best case. But the worst case scenario would be that no one would have ever found me. So I advised no one to live in the post-Soviet countries at 90, LOL. Okay, I was able to talk to the new owner and press that the journalist would be happy to bring this up to the level of national prominence so he can no longer be helped by his dear father-in-law, the chief of police. So he immediately offered to pay me the amount of money that was in the contract and to sign it in a new way, but strangely enough, it was much lower than the market. so I had to continue negotiations. After a month of nerves, I received compensation of $900,000, which is enough to buy a plot in a quieter place away from the roads and more left over to provide for my retirement. Of course, I do not wish anyone to go through such a thing, and of course, after all this, I'm left with a residue, but I reassure myself that it could have ended a lot worse. And another thing, now the new owner will have to spend about $100,000 for the filtration system from the car wash and about the same to build a sewage system so that the water would not get in my former creek because someone unknown anonymous filed a complaint to the Maine Department of Ecology. And our next story. I sued my boss for damages after getting out of my contract. I worked at this company for 6 years. It's a small, privately owned business, but due to the nature of the work we do, I had to sign a non-compete agreement upon getting hired. Well, about 6 months ago, I got a job offer from a company that does similar, but not directly competing work. Better pay, better benefits, shorter commute, basically an all-around upgrade for me. I told them about my non-compete, so they were aware of it, but since the company isn't a direct competitor, I figured my non-compete agreement would not apply. I asked a lawyer about it to make sure. He said there was enough difference between the two businesses and no similar clients that he thought I'd be okay. Since I didn't want to completely burn bridges, I talked to my boss about it. I told him I'd been offering a job and asked him if he would sign a release from my non-compete so that I could take this new job without fear of any reprisal. He refused and decided to fire me the next day. I talked with the company that gave me the offer, and they started to second-guess whether or not my non-compete would actually apply, and they withdrew their offer until I got my non-compete sorted out. So now I'm unemployed and facing a court battle against my former boss. My lawyer and I put together a case, give my boss the opportunity to just sign a release and get it over with, or fight us in court. He opted for court. I didn't know he could be that petty and vindictive. We ended up winning after asking for a summary judgment, and my non-compete was ruled invalid and not applicable to this other job, so I told the other company, and I accepted the original offer from them. This is where I might be the a-hole, though. My lawyer asked me if I wanted to try and sue my old boss for damages, lost wages, unused benefits. I had over 200 hours of saved PTO, court and legal fees, wrongful termination, etc. Initially, I didn't want to since I'd won and got what I wanted, but the more I thought about it, I decided to go ahead and sue him for damages. So I had my lawyer draw up a suit and went ahead with it. My boss was livid. He called me and went on a huge rant about how I'm ungrateful and that I would be nowhere without him, and about how dare I sue him when he's done so much for me. I told him he had the chance to let me go, but he opted to fight, so in a way, he brought this on himself. I ended up winning that suit as well, and he had to pay everything. I made out pretty well. I talked with an old coworker from there a while ago, and he said that since I won, everyone else there that signed a non-compete's trying to get out of them, and my old boss is pissed. My old boss thinks I turned everyone against him. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.